In this lesson, we're going to look at the process of merging our separate CAD layers into one layout in Photoshop so that we can start doing some of those Photoshop filters and effects onto our plans. So the file that you can open is 38 begin, and this is the plotted out site plan together with a contour plan that we had extracted from or plotted from CAD itself. So if you want to see that layer a bit clearer, you can just add a new layer underneath it. So you can create that layer, just drag it to the bottom, and then just paint using the paint bucket. You can just add a white background. Now this has been turned vertical since the plotter would usually plot in that direction. And what we want to do now is we want to add the other 3 layers that belong on top of this. So you can go and open your files. It is placed in the referenced files and then plotted drawings. And you can open up the 3 files for the ground floor, which is everything excluding the site file, which we have opened up in Photoshop already. So click on open, and then the 2 settings that I'd like you to point you to that you need to always be quite aware of is the crop to setting and then the resolution. The crop to by default will have bounding box in most cases, and what that will do is that it will crop your drawing, or at least your file size, to the external limits of what the pixel information is on that file. So the disadvantage in an architectural scenario is that you want to keep that complete size of the page that you plotted out on. In other words, if you plotted an A1 as we have, you want to actually have your file still be A1. You don't want your file to get cropped down to a much smaller random size. So always keep this to media box, and that will look at the size of the media being the A1 page that we're bringing in. Then the resolution you want to keep as high as possible, since you want to print at a good quality, and you're no longer printing vector, you're printing a raster image from Photoshop, which means that if you have a very thin line and you have a lot of detail, you're not going to get a good looking resolution if you have a low DPI. So you want to have this at least 300 or more. You can even increase that if you should so feel the need. But otherwise I'm going to keep it at 72 only so that I have a small file to work with, so that you don't have to download these half-gig files onto your computer as you work together in this course. So just remember that these files that I'm using are much lower than what I would recommend. So I'm going to open those files using those settings. And the next thing that you would want to do is to start merging these files together, the different layers that we have plotted. Now the easiest way to merge files would just be to grab the layer and to shift it across, but you'll immediately see the biggest issue with that is that you're not going to actually know what the location of that file should be. In other words, this is going to start moving around, and you want to make sure that you have the exact location in place. You don't actually know where this is supposed to be. So I'm going to delete that. You can see that I've already locked the 2 other layers, since I do not want them to budge 1 millimeter, since they are all meant to align corner to corner. So there's a little technique that I use. It may not be the smartest technique. There may be something better that is already included in Photoshop, but it's just something that I've been doing over the years, so I stick to it. Basically, I draw out a selected square in both opposite corners. I add the paint bucket into those corners on the same layer that my CAD file is in. I then Control A to select everything, and then I Control C the entire file, and then I Control V into my drawing. Then I go and I just delete those corners that have been paint bucketed in. So once you have that in place, you can also lock the position. So instead of locking the entire file, you can just lock the position so that you can't accidentally move it out of alignment. So I'm going to pause the video now, and I'm going to do the exact same thing to the other 2 files that are back here, and then we'll come back to the next stage. So now you can see that all of those layers have been merged together, and I have them here in my layer stack, all as separate layers, so I can basically turn them on and off and manipulate them as I wish. The one thing that you'd like to do now for yourself, if you want to work in that sort of organized way, is to relayer or rename your layers so that you understand what they are. So you can start off at the bottom. This one will be the site, and you can even put a CAD prefix to that so that you understand that it's a original CAD layer. This one is going to be the architecture. This is the grids. And lastly, we are going to have the landscape and interiors. So once you have that done, you want to also then just rotate your entire canvas counterclockwise, and you basically start getting the foundation for a good Photoshop file that you can now start working on. So what I'm going to do in the next lesson is to start looking at a couple of options for how this can be edited in Photoshop and how we can turn it into a good looking presentation drawing.